right, black and white sports reporters. Well, guess what? The Players Union actually sent a counter proposal to the WNBA. And the WNBA promptly rejected it into outer space. They Dikembe Mutombo that thing right back into the sun and said, we are not doing this revenue sharing thing. We keep telling you that.
As tensions escalate, the broader implications of the standoff are becoming impossible to ignore. What began as a contractual negotiation has evolved into a high-stakes confrontation with potential consequences for the entire season. Analysts warn that if neither side softens its position, delays or disruptions could follow, affecting schedules, preparation timelines, and even fan engagement. The situation underscores how collective bargaining disputes often extend far beyond boardrooms. They influence public perception, shape media narratives, and test the loyalty of supporters who simply want to watch the game. When negotiations become contentious, the spotlight shifts from athletic performance to administrative conflict, a transition that rarely benefits the sport's image. For the league, the challenge is balancing fiscal responsibility with the need to maintain positive relationships with its players, who are the face of the product. For the players, the challenge is pushing for improved compensation and conditions without risking a breakdown that could stall momentum built in recent years. Both sides have legitimate priorities, yet those priorities currently appear to be pulling them in opposite directions. Observers note that labor disputes in professional sports often follow a familiar pattern: initial demands, firm rejections, escalating rhetoric, and eventually, after prolonged tension, a compromise neither side originally envisioned. Whether this negotiation will follow that trajectory remains uncertain. Much depends on willingness to adjust expectations and recognize the other party's constraints. What is clear is that the stakes are unusually high. This isn't just about a single contract cycle, it's about establishing a precedent that could shape financial structures for years to come. Decisions made now may determine how revenue is shared, how salaries grow, and how the league positions itself in an increasingly competitive sports marketplace. In that sense, the current impasse represents a defining moment. It is a test of strat.
Take this off as an owner, so we don't care if you lose money. And it's like, okay, but you got to remember that's coming from somebody that their ideology, their personal political ideology is they hate capitalism. You got to remember that. And a lot of these players have that same ideology. So how do you talk business with somebody like that doesn't care? I mean, who doesn't want the business they work for to be fruitful and profitable and blah, blah? I mean, what are you doing there?
At the heart of the dispute lie the specific financial terms outlined in the union's proposal, figures that league officials reportedly consider staggering given the organization's current economic landscape. Central among these demands is a request for players to receive an average of 27.5% of gross revenue throughout the duration of the agreement. Gross revenue, by definition, refers to total income before expenses are deducted, meaning the percentage would be calculated prior to accounting for operational costs such as travel, marketing, staffing, and arena logistics. Although this figure represents a slight reduction from an earlier request of 31%, league executives still view it as unworkable. From their perspective, the distinction between gross and net revenue is not a minor technicality but the crux of the entire dispute. Sharing income before subtracting expenses, they argue, would effectively obligate teams to distribute money they haven't truly earned in profit. In a business already navigating tight margins, such a model could create structural deficits. The proposal also includes a first-year benchmark calling for a 25% share paired with a salary cap set just under $9.5 million. To players, these numbers may represent progress toward compensation they feel reflects their growing market value and the league's increasing visibility. To management, however, they signal a potential financial imbalance that could ripple across franchises. League officials reportedly struggle to reconcile the request with the practical realities of operating a professional sports enterprise. Running a league involves significant expenditures that aren't always visible to fans: venue rentals, insurance, travel logistics, broadcasting infrastructure, and administrative overhead, among many others. These costs must be covered before profit can even be considered. Agreeing to distribute revenue beforehand, they contend, would invert the financial structure on which the league depends. This is why the demand has become such a sticking point. It isn't simply a matter of negotiating a percentage downward or upward. It's about the formula itself. Accepting a gross revenue model would require a fundamental reconfiguration of how finances are allocated, calculated, and sustained. For negotiators, that makes the issue extraordinarily difficult to resolve. Adjusting a number is relatively simple, redefining an economic system is not. And until both sides can agree on the underlying framework, progress on any other aspect of the deal may remain stalled. In many ways, this single clause has become the symbolic battleground for the entire negotiation, a line neither party seems willing to cross.
Some concessions. I don't understand why all of this comes out late at night. They try to put this stuff out at night because they're trying to tamper down the blowback, and I'm not kidding you. All the news cycles are over with for the day, yada, yada, yada. That's exactly why they do this, so they won't get dragged as much throughout the day. I kid you not. Submitted a counterproposal to the WNBA on Tuesday that included some concessions on revenue sharing and housing.
League leadership insists that the dispute ultimately comes down to more than percentages, it hinges on definitions. Specifically, the definition of gross revenue proposed in the players' plan has become a focal point of contention. Officials argue that distributing a share of income before expenses are deducted could saddle teams with massive financial losses, potentially totaling hundreds of millions of dollars over time. From their standpoint, that scenario is not merely undesirable, it's untenable. Executives emphasize that professional sports leagues operate within complex financial ecosystems. Revenue streams fluctuate based on ticket sales, sponsorship deals, media contracts, and merchandise performance, all of which can vary from season to season. Meanwhile, many expenses remain fixed or even increase over time. If a large portion of income must be allocated before those costs are covered, teams could find themselves operating at a deficit regardless of how well they perform commercially. Because of this, league officials are pushing strongly for a framework that accounts for expenses first. They argue that any sustainable agreement must reflect the true cost of doing business. In their view, ignoring those costs risks destabilizing franchises and undermining the league's long-term viability. This is why they describe the union's current definition as a red line, something they cannot accept under any circumstances. From the player's perspective, however, the emphasis on expenses can appear opaque. Without full transparency into financial records, some may worry that cost calculations could be used to minimize their share. That concern fuels their preference for a gross revenue model, which they see as more straightforward and less susceptible to accounting manipulation.
That the teams continued to provide housing in the first several years of the new agreement, but that in later years, teams no longer be obligated to provide housing for players, making close to the maximum salary on multi-year deals and receiving full salary protection. That makes sense. Why should they keep paying for housing if they're making all this money? I mean, it's like, go out on your own and live your own life, and all we do is we pay your salaries. That's wild. It's wild. WNBA teams are required to provide housing.
The league's response did not resemble a routine rejection or a cautious request for revisions. Instead, it landed with the force of a thunderclap. When the latest proposal from the players' side reached the offices of the WNBA, the reaction was swift, emphatic, and unmistakably final. Officials didn't merely decline it, they dismissed it outright, sending a message that reverberated through front offices, locker rooms, and agent circles alike. According to insiders, leadership treated the document not as a starting point for discussion but as a fundamentally unworkable framework that could destabilize the league's financial structure if accepted. Commissioner Adam Silver's administrative circle reportedly moved quickly to label the package unrealistic, arguing that the revenue-sharing demands outlined within it ignored the operational realities of running a professional sports organization. From their perspective, the request wasn't just ambitious, it was structurally incompatible with a business that still relies on careful budgeting, long-term investment, and cost management. The language used internally, sources suggest, was unusually blunt, reflecting a level of concern rarely seen in standard collective bargaining exchanges. What made the rejection especially striking was its tone. Negotiations typically involve counteroffers, softened language, and signals of willingness to compromise. This time, the league's stance resembled a line drawn firmly in the sand. Executives emphasized that agreeing to share a large percentage of gross revenue before accounting for expenses could undermine profitability across multiple franchises. They warned that such a system might force owners into sustained financial losses, something they consider unsustainable regardless of long-term growth projections. The implications extend far beyond spreadsheets. At stake is the philosophical blueprint for how the league functions. On one side stand players advocating for a model they believe better reflects their value and contribution to the sport's rising popularity. On the other side stands management insisting that financial viability must remain the foundation of any agreement. This clash transforms the dispute from a routine contract disagreement into a broader ideological confrontation about fairness, economics, and control. For many observers, the most telling aspect wasn't the rejection itself but the clarity of it. There was no ambiguity, no hint that the proposal might be salvaged with minor edits. The message conveyed was absolute: under the current terms, there would be no deal. That level of finality suggests a widening gap between the two sides, one that threatens not only negotiations but potentially the timeline of the upcoming season. In effect, the response signaled more than dissatisfaction. It signaled alarm. League officials appear convinced that conceding to the proposal's core principles would reshape the financial ecosystem in ways they consider untenable. And by making their stance so explicit, they've ensured that both players and fans now understand the stakes. This is no longer a quiet negotiation behind closed doors. It's a high-stakes standoff whose outcome could redefine the balance of power within the sport.
Wow. WNBA fires back at Players Union over unrealistic counter proposal. I mean, if there had been ink involved in that statement, it wouldn't have been dry. And the WNBA swatted this joker down. Adam Silver said, nah, get out, nah. We're not doing that because for some reason you don't know the difference between gross revenue and net revenue. WNBA released a fiery statement late Tuesday night calling the Players Union latest collective bargaining agreement.
The timing of the union's latest move added another layer of intrigue to an already volatile situation. Late Tuesday night, the Players Association, formerly known as the WNBPA, submitted its revised counterproposal. Delivering it at such an hour was widely interpreted as a strategic decision. Some analysts believe the late-night release was intended to minimize immediate media coverage, allowing the document to circulate quietly before public scrutiny intensified. The proposal reportedly included adjustments designed to signal flexibility. There were modifications to revenue-sharing figures and revisions addressing housing provisions, issues that have long been priorities for players seeking improved working conditions. On paper, these concessions might have suggested movement toward common ground. Yet the league's response arrived almost instantly and with striking clarity: the revised terms were still unacceptable. That swift dismissal undermined any expectation that the timing strategy would soften reactions. Instead, it drew even more attention. Commentators began dissecting not only the contents of the proposal but also the method of its delivery. What was meant to slip under the radar ended up spotlighted, with analysts questioning whether the union had miscalculated how the league would react. Negotiation tactics often play a crucial role in shaping public perception. By submitting a proposal late at night, organizations sometimes hope to control the narrative, limiting immediate criticism and buying time to frame the discussion on their own terms. In this case, however, the approach appeared to backfire. The league's rapid and public rejection ensured that the story gained traction quickly, fueling debates across sports media platforms and fan communities. The episode highlighted just how far apart the two sides remain. Even after revisions and concessions, the proposal failed to meet the league's threshold for viability. That outcome suggests the disagreement isn't rooted in minor details but in structural principles that neither side is willing to abandon. For observers, the failed timing strategy became symbolic of the broader negotiation struggle. It illustrated that messaging tactics alone cannot bridge substantive gaps. No matter how carefully a proposal is presented, its success ultimately depends on whether its terms align with the other party's core priorities. In this case, they clearly did not. As a result, the late-night submission didn't calm tensions, it intensified them. Instead of easing the path toward compromise, it reinforced the perception that the two camps are operating on entirely different wavelengths. And with each unsuccessful attempt at progress, the possibility of a prolonged standoff grows more real.